When you think about Sherlock Holmes, what comes to mind is, well, it's the ultimate rationalist, isn't it?
It absolutely is. You're talking about the pinnacle of cold scientific reason, the master of logic.
Deduction, objective fact.
Hmm.
He's really the standard that all other literary detectives are, measured against.
He's more than just a character. He's become a kind of philosophical ideal. Holmes is the mind that strips away all sentimentality, all emotion,
Right.
to find the stark, hidden truth that's buried under all the confusion and bias. He really represents the triumph of empirical science in a very messy world.
But here's the magnificent pivot, the stunning, beautiful contradiction that's at the heart of all the sources we've gathered on his creator, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. The man who dedicated his entire literary life to crafting this icon of pure logic was himself a practicing physician, a top-tier athlete, a goalkeeper for a football club.
A champion cricketer, no less.
Exactly. And maybe most surprisingly, a champion of these obscure causes, including a fervent, lifelong belief in communicating with the dead.
And the fairies. You can't forget the fairies.
And the absolute, total authenticity of the famous Cottingley fairies photographs. It's just staggering.
It truly is the ultimate duality. So for our deep dive today, we're charting the biographical sweep of a man who, you could argue, lived in a state of constant internal conflict. All the evidence shows that his rigorous scientific training, which is the source of Holmes's power, was perpetually at war with this profound, almost spiritual need for the inexplicable, for the mystical.
It's a tension that seems to define his entire public and private life.
It really does.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We are diving deep into the facts that describe a life lived in, well, almost parallel universes. The man who wrote The Ultimate Victory of the Mind over the Unknown.
Also desperately wanted to prove that the unknown was in fact knowable.
Exactly. But first, let's begin with a small act of deduction ourselves, right off the bat. There's a piece of nomenclature we really need to clear up for the record.
Ah, yes. It's a very Holmesian detail, actually. Most people, they instinctively refer to him as Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Right, treating Conan as if it's part of a compound surname. We see it all the time.
All the time. But if you look at the primary source, his baptism entry, you find the technical truth.
Which is?
His given names were Arthur Ignatius Conan, and his surname was simply Doyle. Conan was just his middle name.
It came from a wealthy uncle, right? The one who helped pay for his education.
Precisely. And this detail matters because even though he himself embraced the grander-sounding Conan Doyle later in life, the formal state records, they uphold the truth.
So when he was knighted by King Edward VII in 1902...
he was gazetted as Doyle. Simple as that. The British Library and the Library of Congress both formally list Doyle as the surname.
It's a technicality, but it immediately grounds us in the facts, which is exactly what Holmes would demand. So our mission today is to recognize that this foundational commitment to deduction, in fact, was always in tension with his passion for causes, whether that was human rights, sportsmanship, or ultimately the spirit world.
We're charting the dual life of this remarkably prolific figure who, through his works and his actions, secretly architected a lot of the modern world.
To really grasp the complexity of Conan Doyle, we have to start at his foundation, which was anything but stable.
He was born in Edinburgh, Scotland in 1859 into an Irish Catholic family. His father, Charles Altamont Doyle, was an artist and a civil servant.
And that early family life, it was marked by a kind of catastrophic instability, which you have to think shaped young Arthur's search for order and control later on.
Without a doubt. By 1864, the family began to scatter. This was due to his father's debilitating alcoholism and the psychiatric illness that followed.
He was institutionalized, wasn't he? Repeatedly.
He was, and that is such a crucial biographical detail. The father's instability, this chaotic, unpredictable breakdown of the rational family structure.
It must have driven Doyle towards systems of absolute certainty. He spent his childhood literally witnessing the erosion of a mind.
And his later life was spent trying to prove that the mind, or maybe the spirit, was indestructible.
Wow.
The children were separated for a time before the family finally reunited, but they were living in these squalid tenement flats. Arthur's education was entirely dependent on wealthy uncles.
The Conan family.
The Conan family, yes. They funded his attendance at Jesuit preparatory schools in England, Hodder Place, and then the rather notorious Stonyhurst College from 1868 to 1875.
And he did not enjoy it. He found Stonyhurst intellectually and spiritually just confining.
He did. He described the academic system as harsh, focusing strictly on, and I'm quoting here, rudiments, rhetoric, Euclidean geometry, algebra, and the classics.
So it was all about mental discipline through repetitive, very limited exercises.
He saw it very critically, less as genuine intellectual pursuit and more as a form of mental conditioning. He famously said the education could only be excused on the plea that any exercise, however stupid in itself, forms a sort of mental dumbbell by which one can improve one's mind.
Mental dumbbell. I love that. And the emphasis on corporal punishment and severe discipline, that certainly contributed to his eventual drift away from Catholicism.
It did, and that initial rejection of faith was really solidified when he spent a year in Feldkirch, Austria, at a Jesuit school called Stella Matutina.
Right, from 1875 to 76. That was mainly to perfect his German, correct?
It was. But he returned an agnostic. He moved away from the restrictive faith of his upbringing and toward a reliance on, well, observable facts.
And those observable facts became the subject of his true academic endeavor. Medicine.
Exactly. He studied at the University of Edinburgh Medical School from 1876 to 1881, and this is where the seed for Sherlock Holmes was truly planted, not just in theory, but in rigorous daily practice.
This grounding in medicine is what gave him his whole scientific methodology. He worked extensively in various towns, Aston, Sheffield, Rutensveit towns.
And this practical experience, it wasn't just physical labor. It was observation under immense pressure. And it produced immediate scholarly results.
You mean even while he was still a student?
Yes. In 1879, he published his first academic article, Gelsemium as a Poison, in the prestigious British Medical Journal.
Which is astonishing. His very first formal publication was a toxicology report. I mean, what does that tell you about the man?
It tells you his initial passion wasn't storytelling. It was the precise forensic analysis of death and its causes.
And our sources point out that this specific study on gelsemium was so meticulously detailed that authorities today still recognize its potential usefulness in modern murder investigations.
His dedication was just immense. It led him to complete a Doctor of Medicine degree, the MD, which is a higher research qualification beyond the standard medical degrees he initially earned in 1885.
And his dissertation was on tabes dorsalis.
Tabes dorsalis, yes. A severe neurological condition that results from untreated syphilis. It causes wasting of the spinal cord and difficulty walking.
A deep dive into a devastating disease of the nervous system. So the medical training was central to his intellectual development, but it was also central to his sense of adventure. He used his professional qualification to see the world.
Absolutely. Talk about hands-on experience. In 1880, he served as a doctor on the Greenland whaler Hope, enduring the harsh realities of Arctic whaling. Then, post-graduation in 1881, he was ship's surgeon on the SS Mayumba, sailing off on a voyage to the West African coast.
These maritime experiences must have been essential. They provided that texture of danger and vastness that you feel in so much of his adventure writing.
Totally. But when he finally returned to dry land to try and set up a stable life, the reality was a bit underwhelming.
Right. In 1882, he moves to Southsea in Portsmouth and sets up an independent medical practice. He arrived with less than 10 pounds.
A tiny sum even then. And the key takeaway here is that the practice failed. It was largely unsuccessful. He just sat in his consulting room day after day.
Waiting for patients.
Waiting for patients who simply did not appear. It was this failure, this, gaping time void created by a lack of business that forced him back to his pen.
So the very existence of Sherlock Holmes is directly contingent upon Arthur Conan Doyle being a failed provincial doctor.
It is. While waiting, he wrote fiction again. And that's how A Study in Scarlet was created in 1887.
He wrote it in an intense 3-week burst when he was only 27.
But his initial experience with publishers was demoralizing. Wardlock & Co. accepted the story, but they paid him a single lump sum of 25 fives for the full rights.
For all the rights. To put that in perspective for you, that's about $3,000 in today's money. For a character who would become immortal.
That experience definitely hardened his view of the publishing industry, the commercial side of art. He felt grievously exploited.
And that resentment clearly contributed to his later desire to just escape the character entirely.
A character who was, of course, modeled explicitly on his former medical lecturer, Joseph Bell.
Right. Bell had that famous ability to deduce a patient's occupation, their recent travels, their habits, just by observing these minute details. A stain on a coat, the angle of a hat.
Doyle even wrote to Bell saying, "It is most certainly to you that I owe Sherlock Holmes."
I wonder if Doyle was also modeling the flaws of his mentor. I mean, Bell was often criticized for his cold, clinical demeanor, which sometimes bordered on being unfeeling.
That's a fascinating angle.
Did Doyle, maybe unconsciously, imbue Holmes with that same emotional sterility as a nod to the purely logical approach he learned in medicine.
He certainly built a man focused solely on scientific deduction. But the character, once it was created, it quickly became an obsession for the public and a significant burden for the author.
The ultimate unwanted hero. By November 1891, he was already complaining about the character's dominance. He wrote to his mother, "I think of slaying Holmes and winding him up for good and all. He takes my mind from better things."
And he tried to make Holmes financially untenable to force his disappearance. He dramatically raised his fee to this enormous sum, about 1,000 guineas per story.
To discourage the publishers.
To discourage them, yes. But instead, they just willingly paid it. It instantly made him one of the best-paid authors of his era purely because of the character he resented.
He finally succeeded, though. In December 1893, he sends Holmes and Professor Moriarty plunging together down the Reichenbach Falls in The Final Problem.
And the public reaction was immediate, intense, and frankly furious. People wore black armbands. There was genuine mourning.
The outcry eventually coerced him back. He tentatively returned in 1901 with The Hound of the Baskervilles.
But crucially, that was framed as a story set before the Reichenbach Falls death. A prequel, essentially.
The full, definitive explanation for the resurrection didn't arrive until 1903 with The Adventure of the Empty House.
Right, and this is where the contextual detail is so important.
Yeah.
He explained that only Moriarty had fallen, but Holmes had chosen to fake his own death to escape other dangerous enemies who were still hunting him.
Specifically, Colonel Sebastian Moran.
Colonel Sebastian Moran, identified as Holmes's second most dangerous adversary after Moriarty. So Holmes was essentially forced into this multi-year deep cover operation to eliminate Moran and the rest of Moriarty's network.
Doyle gave the world an explanation rooted in tactical necessity.
But the real explanation was commercial necessity. The creation, it turned out, was far stronger than the creator's wishes.
So if you look at the sheer volume of his work outside of the detective genre, you quickly realize how much Doyle was chafing under the shadow of Holmes.
Oh, absolutely. He deeply, deeply desired recognition as a serious literary figure, especially in historical fiction.
He truly believed his historical novels were his masterpieces. He wrote 7 of them, mainly between 1888 and 1906. Classics like The White Company and its prequel, Sir Nigel.
These were sweeping narratives set in the Middle Ages, meticulously researched, and they were widely praised by critics at the time.
He was aiming for a literary legacy comparable to someone like Sir Walter Scott, focusing on grand themes of chivalry, honor, national identity.
And it's so important to note that many contemporary critics actually agreed with Doyle. They thought these historical epics were his finest achievements.
A viewpoint that's been completely eclipsed by the enduring popularity of Holmes today.
Totally. But he couldn't stay confined to history. His mind was just too restless, too drawn to adventure and the fantastic.
And that's where he introduced the bombastic, irascible scientist, Professor Challenger, a complete counterpoint to Holmes.
Challenger starred in 5 narratives between 1912 and 1929, and unlike the cool, detached Holmes, Challenger was all passion, volatile temper, and reckless scientific ambition.
His best-known non-Holmes work, The Lost World, which features Challenger's expedition to a hidden plateau where dinosaurs still roam.
It cemented his place as a pioneer in science fiction and fantasy.
And we can't forget Brigadier Gerard, the humorous, often vain, but very brave Napoleonic soldier whose stories Doyle collected into 2 volumes. He really explored every corner of the literary map.
And this tendency to blur the lines between reality and fiction. It's a theme that runs right through his work. Sometimes his fiction didn't just entertain. It actually altered the popular understanding of real historical events.
You're talking about his short story, J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement from 1884. The one that dealt with the mystery of the brigantine Mary Celeste. The ship that was discovered drifting in the Atlantic in 1872 with no crew aboard. A genuine maritime mystery.
Doyle took that genuine event and, through his storytelling, provided this hugely compelling but entirely fabricated explanation. And here is where his power as a writer becomes almost frightening.
How so?
The sources show that he added fictional details that became cemented in the popular imagination as historical truth.
For instance, Doyle's story claimed the ship was found in perfect condition. In reality, it had taken on a significant amount of water.
Exactly. He also claimed all the ship's boats were present when one was clearly missing. Even his alternative spelling of the ship's name, Marie Celeste, became the commonly used spelling for decades, overwriting the original Mary Celeste.
Wow. So his ability to write a gripping narrative was so effective that his fiction fundamentally overwrote the documented facts for millions of people.
It's a testament to his narrative genius, but it also, it foreshadows his later, more concerning willingness to accept compelling narrative over empirical proof in his spiritualist phase.
It's also important to circle back to how this prolific career was financially enabled. In 1891, he decided to specialize, aiming for the lucrative and respected field of ophthalmology.
He did. He first spent time studying at the Portsmouth Eye Hospital to qualify for prescribing glasses, and then he traveled to Vienna, the capital of specialized medicine.
He was hoping to spend 6 months training to become a specialist eye surgeon.
But the reality check came very quickly. He found the German medical lectures utterly impossible to follow, especially the complex, specialized terms. He quit after just 2 months.
His dream of becoming a surgical specialist just evaporated.
It did. Instead of training, he spent his remaining time in Vienna just enjoying the local life ice skating with his wife, Louisa, and writing.
He did open an office in London, though, at 2 Upper Wimpole Street.
He did, but according to his own brutally honest autobiography, his career as an ophthalmologist was an utter failure. He never saw a single patient.
Not one.
Not one.
That commercial failure was the catalyst. It meant he had an office, professional respectability, and 0 patients, which gave him the immense, quiet time needed to pursue his true vocation, writing.
If he had been a successful eye doctor, we might never have had the later Holmes stories or Professor Challenger or any of his other great works.
And we shouldn't overlook his work for the theater. He recognized the dramatic potential of his stories and wrote plays like Waterloo.
That was based on a veteran's reminiscences of the Napoleonic Wars. He also adapted his own short story into the long-running play The Speckled Band.
He even collaborated with J.M. Barrie, the future creator of Peter Pan, on the libretto of Jane Anne in 1893.
His interests were fundamentally about creation, across all mediums.
So when we pivot from the literary life to the public sphere, we see a man who is driven by this ferocious, patriotic, and physical energy.
Doyle was defined by the Victorian ideal of masculine vigor, which stands in such sharp contrast to the solitary intellectual existence of the writer.
This physical exertion, it wasn't just recreational for him, it was central to his identity as a Briton.
Yeah.
He saw his physical fitness as a moral necessity.
He really did. He was involved in an extraordinary range of sports. For instance, he played football soccer as a goalkeeper for the amateur side Portsmouth Association Football Club.
Using the highly unglamorous pseudonym A.C. Smith.
A.C. Smith, a goalkeeper, the position that requires quick, decisive, solitary judgments under extreme pressure.
Maybe that fits the man who created Holmes better than we realize. But his most dedicated sporting pursuit was probably cricket.
Oh, he was a serious player. He participated in 10 first-class matches for the prestigious Marylebone Cricket Club, the MCC, between 1899 and 1907.
And he was captain of the amateur authors' Ake team, which had a genuinely legendary literary lineup.
It did. J.M. Barrie, P.G. Wodehouse, A.A. Milne. Imagine facing that bowling lineup.
That roster is incredible. And his dedication was reflected in his diary, where the scores and details of his cricket matches were often the most common entries during that period.
And he achieved one of the great bragging rights in cricket history.
Yes, he did.
His highest batting score was 43, which is respectable, but his singular bowling achievement was taking just one first-class wicket in his career.
And that wicket was none other than W.G. Grace.
The most famous and influential cricketer of the Victorian era. Doyle even immortalized the moment in verse, which just highlights how profoundly important that moment of physical conquest was to him.
This intense interest in physical prowess fed directly into his political activism, particularly in marksmanship.
Right. In 1900, at his home, Undershaw, he founded the Undershaw Rifle Club, constructing a dedicated 100-yard range.
This was a direct reaction to what he saw as the embarrassing military unpreparedness of Great Britain during the Second Boer War.
He strongly believed that the general male population needed to be trained in marksmanship for national defense. He tirelessly championed the establishment of miniature rifle clubs,
seeing them as democratic and accessible ways to create a trained reserve force.
Exactly. We also find him involved in boxing. He was an amateur boxer himself, and he was invited, though he ultimately declined, to referee the famous James Jeffries-Jack Johnson heavyweight championship fight in 1909.
He was also a keen golfer and even competed in the English Amateur Billiards Championship in 1913.
And we really owe him a debt for popularizing modern winter sports. While living in Switzerland, he wrote a hugely influential article in 1894 called An Alpine Pass on Ski.
Right, for the Strand magazine. Before this, skiing was largely unknown as a leisure pursuit in Central Europe.
His vivid description of crossing a mountain pass is credited with sparking the public imagination and really beginning Switzerland's long association with the sport.
His commitment to physical ideals even led him to judge the world's first major bodybuilding competition, the Great Competition, in 1901, alongside the pioneering strongman Eugen Sandow.
It's clear that everything Doyle did, from writing adventure to promoting sport, was filtered through this lens of patriotic, physical, and moral crusading.
And that crusading zeal also informed his political service. During the Second Boer War, he served as a volunteer physician in South Africa from March to June 1900.
When he returned, he penned 2 books, The Great Boer War and The War in South Africa, Its Cause and Conduct.
That second, shorter work was a direct piece of advocacy, defending the United Kingdom's conduct during the conflict against international criticism.
He was so committed to this cause that he firmly believed it was his advocacy rather than his literary work that led to his knighthood by King Edward VII in 1902.
He was a political activist, though not a successful politician.
Not at all. He stood for Parliament twice as a liberal unionist, a splinter group that broke away over Irish Home Rule in 1900 and 1906. He was unsuccessful in both campaigns.
But his true political legacy rests not on elections, but on his tireless human rights work. In 1909, he wrote The Crime of the Congo,
A scathing, widely read pamphlet that denounced the horrific atrocities and exploitation occurring in the Congo Free State under King Leopold II of Belgium.
He worked closely with other reformers, notably the journalist E.D. Morel and the diplomat Roger Casement.
The source material suggests these men were highly influential, possibly inspiring the characterizations in his novel The Lost World.
This commitment to justice remained paramount, even when Casement was later executed for treason following the Irish Easter Rising.
Doyle fought hard to save him, arguing that Casement had been driven mad by his experiences and the strain of his reform work.
The narrative of the Crusader, however, it gets complicated by his shifting alliances. Prior to WWI, the sources indicate he supported the British Brothers League,
An anti-immigration group caught up in the rising tide of Germanophobia, which seems inconsistent with the man who championed the wrongly accused half-Indian lawyer George Edalji.
It does. It raises the crucial question. How could a champion of individual justice support a group based on collective prejudice?
It speaks to the complexity of his fierce patriotism. He saw threats to Britain, whether internal or external, and he acted on them without the nuanced political caution of a true statesman.
By 1914, he was back in the mainstream, signing the Author's Declaration with 52 other leading authors, justifying Britain's entry into WWI after the invasion of Belgium.
But the most stunning intersection of his logic and his compassion is his transformation into a real-life Sherlock Holmes, applying pure deduction to closed legal cases.
This is where we see the deductive mind at its absolute finest, working not for literary fame, but for actual measurable justice.
The 1906 case of George Edalji is perhaps the most famous. Edalji, a shy, highly intelligent, half-British, half-Indian lawyer, was wrongly convicted of writing threatening letters and mutilating animals in Great Warley.
The police had targeted him with almost no evidence, driven largely by racial bias. Doyle took the case on personally.
He used deductive reasoning to analyze the handwriting on the threatening letters, which he proved did not match Edalji's. More critically,
He highlighted the fact that the animal mutilations continued after Edalji was jailed.
an undeniable logical proof of his innocence. Doyle's investigation was meticulous. He showed that the police had relied on flimsy circumstantial evidence and had ignored clear indicators pointing elsewhere.
And his sustained public advocacy resulted in Edalji's release. The political consequence of his dedication was profound.
It was. The outrage generated by the Edalji case contributed directly to the establishment of the Court of Criminal Appeal in 1907. Doyle, the novelist, forced a foundational reform of the British legal system.
Then there was the case of Oscar Slater, a German Jew who ran a gambling den. Slater was convicted in 1908 of bludgeoning an 82-year-old woman in Glasgow.
Doyle was captivated by the inconsistency of the police work and the injustice of the conviction, which he suspected was driven by prejudice against Slater's occupation and heritage.
He poured time, resources, and significant personal funds into the case, paying most of the financial costs for Slater's defense and eventual appeal.
He didn't just write a letter, he became the lead investigator. He noticed that crucial witness testimony had been tampered with and that the police had failed to investigate other plausible suspects.
And it took 20 long years. But Doyle's sustained effort finally saw Oscar Slater successfully appeal his conviction in 1928.
These cases demonstrate that the real-life detective was not just a literary curiosity. He was a tireless champion of the vulnerable, using the exact scientific logic he taught Holmes to combat genuine corruption and prejudice.
So if the first half of Arthur Conan Doyle's life was devoted to applying science and logic to the world around him, in medicine, in sport, and in the courtroom, the second half was defined by his all-consuming passion for the unprovable, spiritualism.
His embrace of the occult was not a sudden conversion. It was a slow burn that had been active since 1887, the same year A Study in Scarlet was published.
Wow, that early.
That early. He began investigating psychic phenomena in South Sea, attending seances, attempting experiments in telepathy, and sitting with various mediums. He was looking for proof.
He publicly declared himself a spiritualist in 1887. And this search for formalized belief led him to join institutional groups. That same year, he became a Freemason.
And in 1889, he co-founded the Hampshire Society for Psychical Research. He was determined to apply structured scientific inquiry to the world of spirits.
But the philosophical interest, it became a crushing emotional necessity because of the devastation of the First World War.
The sheer scale of loss destroyed the optimistic worldview of the Edwardian age, and Doyle was personally hit incredibly hard.
So while he was already publicly committed to spiritualism before the war ended, the profound personal losses cemented his belief system. His son, Kingsley.
Kingsley contracted pneumonia while recovering from serious injuries sustained at the Battle of the Somme, and he died in October 1918.
And the grief didn't stop there.
Yeah.
Immediately following the war, he also lost his brother, Brigadier General Innes Doyle, to pneumonia in 1919.
He lost two brothers-in-law, including E.W. Hornung, who was the creator of the gentleman thief Raffles, and two nephews. The losses were relentless and overwhelming.
And the sources explain that this experience gave him the deep conviction that spiritualism was a new revelation sent by God specifically to bring solace to a grieving world.
He needed proof that the vast sacrifice of WWI had not been in vain, that his loved ones were not simply gone.
And this emotional need, unfortunately, often superseded his famed capacity for deduction.
The scientific mind was entirely overcome by the mystical heart, leading him to endorse phenomena later proven to be blatant trickery and fraud.
This is the man who meticulously dismantled the flimsy evidence against George Edalji, yet he publicly vouched for numerous mediums and performers who were known charlatans, people like Eusapia Palladino and Mina Crandon.
A classic example is the Zanzigs, Julius and Agnes. Doyle was absolutely convinced they possessed genuine, inexplicable telepathic powers for their mind-reading act.
And what was the truth?
Years later, in 1924, the Zanzigs confessed that their act was pure illusion and even published their secret code, Our Secrets, detailing the deception. Doyle's commitment to believing was so intense that he dismissed all alternative logical explanations.
But the most famous and, I think, difficult instance of this blind spot is the Cottingley Fairies controversy.
Oh, yes. In 1917, two young cousins, Francis Griffiths and Elsie Wright, produced 5 photographs supposedly capturing fairies in their Yorkshire garden.
And Doyle, utterly convinced, championed these images. His 1922 work, The Coming of the Fairies, reproduced all 5 photographs and asserted his absolute conviction that they were authentic.
He dismissed anyone who suggested they were faked. He saw them as concrete evidence of the spirit world, a bridge between our reality and another.
Despite the creator of the Master of Deduction staking his reputation on them decades later, the photographs were definitively shown to have been faked using cutouts from a popular children's book.
What's fascinating, though, is that the cousins, even after confessing to the fakery, maintained until the end that they genuinely had seen real fairies, even if the photographs were staged.
This profound intellectual surrender created a spectacular and bitter rivalry with his friend, the world-famous escape artist Harry Houdini.
Doyle was convinced, even against Houdini's explicit insistence, that the magician's incredible escape feats were not stage illusion or trickery,
but evidence of genuine supernatural powers. He publicly affirmed this belief in his book, The Edge of the Unknown.
Houdini, meanwhile, had begun this major crusade against spiritualism. After the death of his beloved mother, he found himself repeatedly confronted by mediums claiming to channel her spirit.
And he discovered them all to be cynical frauds.
Exactly. So Houdini became a prominent opponent of the movement, using his knowledge of illusion to actively expose mediums, driven by an acute moral outrage.
He desperately tried to persuade Doyle. He revealed his secrets, demonstrating that his escapes were based on mechanical skills, muscle control, and lockpicking.
hoping that Doyle, the man of logic, would see the light and stop endorsing fraud.
But Doyle refused.
He refused. He argued that Houdini was either being unconsciously directed by spirits or was deliberately lying to conceal his true supernatural gifts.
Which led to a very public and acrimonious split between the two men, the master of illusion and the master of deduction, irrevocably divided over the nature of reality.
This zealotry even caused a rift with his own research community. In 1922, when psychical researcher Harry Price accused the spirit photographer William Hope of fraud.
By showing Hope was using sleight of hand to produce fake photos of spirits.
Yes, Doyle publicly defended Hope. He took such deep offense at the debunking that he threatened Price's position in the National Laboratory of Psychical Research.
And in protest, believing the Society for Psychical Research was fundamentally opposed to the spirit world, Doyle led 84 members to resign.
He spent the last decade of his life on this continuous, globe-trotting spiritualist mission, lecturing across Australia, New Zealand, Europe, and the United States, convinced that this new revelation was the key to humanity's future comfort.
After witnessing this constant war between the logical and the mystical, the detective and the dreamer, well, it raises a truly provocative question. Could the master of deduction have been involved in one of the 20th century's great scientific deceptions? I'm talking about the Piltdown Man hoax.
It's a compelling piece of historical speculation. The Piltdown Man hoax, uncovered in 1912, involved the deliberate planting of counterfeit hominid fossils in England that were presented as the missing link.
A discovery that fooled the world for over 4 decades.
It did. And the theory that Doyle was the perpetrator gained traction years after his death, most notably from the historian Richard Milner. Milner argued that Doyle had a plausible motive.
Which was?
Revenge. Revenge on the scientific establishment for debunking a psychic he favored. A way of striking back at the world of empirical certainty that mocked his beliefs.
Milner pointed to cryptic clues allegedly planted by Doyle within the lost world, including a character named Professor Summerlee, a fierce anti-spiritualist who was made to look foolish.
Plus, the hoax site was near Doyle's home, and he certainly played golf in the area.
However, more rigorous, modern scientific deduction seems to have cleared Doyle's name, ironically enough.
It has. DNA analysis conducted in 2016 strongly suggests that the actual perpetrator was Charles Dawson, the amateur archaeologist who initially found the remains.
And anthropologists have since confirmed that while Doyle did know Dawson, Doyle was far too busy, a public man, and very busy, as one researcher noted, to have orchestrated such a lengthy and elaborate scientific fraud.
The evidence points squarely at Dawson, who possessed a clear motive for fame. It's a delicious historical twist. The man of logic is accused of fraud, only to be cleared by forensic science.
Beyond his intellectual and spiritual pursuits, Doyle left a very physical legacy related to his interest in design and architecture, another facet of his desire to impose order and structure on the world.
He was deeply involved in designing his own home, Undershaw, in Surrey, which he built in 1895 and lived in until 1907. He wanted the house to be a manifestation of his own organized mind.
Which is why the home later became a site of major conservation battles led by Doyle fans keen to preserve the historic structure.
And his ambition wasn't limited to his own house. In 1912, while staying at the Lyndhurst Grand Hotel, he found time to sketch original designs for a third-story extension and a complete facade alteration.
And when the work was completed, it was built almost exactly to his amateur but precise plans.
He saw himself as an architect of systems and structures, whether they were literary, legal, or physical. And tying back to his defining passion, in 1926, he personally provided £500 of the total £600 construction costs for a spiritualist temple in Camden.
And he laid the foundations on himself. He was building temples both philosophical and physical.
He also created one final, lasting institution based on his lifelong interest in crime and detection. In 1903, Doyle founded the Crimes Club,
a private social organization dedicated to discussing crime, criminology, and the art of detection.
That club, initially filled with figures like H.B. Irving and P.G. Wodehouse, continues today as our society. It's yet another example of Doyle taking a personal, intellectual interest detection and formalizing it into a lasting, structured institution.
Arthur Conan Doyle died on July 7, 1930, at the age of 71, of a heart attack at his home, Windlesham Manor.
He was found clutching his chest in the hall. His final reported words, directed toward his wife, Jean, they capture a sense of domestic peace that often eluded his public life.
What were they?
Profoundly simple. You are wonderful.
The issue of his burial was complicated by the fact that he was a spiritualist, not a Christian. He was initially buried in his rose garden.
And later reinterred with his wife at Minstead Churchyard in the New Forest. His gravestone epitaph captures the breadth of his incredible dual life perfectly. Steel true, blade straight, Arthur Conan Doyle, knight patriot, physician, and man of letters.
He is rightly commemorated with statues in both Crowborough, where he lived for 23 years, and Edinburgh, near his birthplace.
Memorials to a life of relentless yet contradictory public action and dedication.
So when we synthesize the entire scope of Arthur Conan Doyle's life, that central tension remains the most potent takeaway.
It does. The scientific mind that created the cold, empirical Holmes was housed within the mystical heart that championed fairyland and sought evidence of the spirit world.
He was a man committed to empirical observation in every sphere, whether he was studying toxicology, meticulously documenting war advocacy, or searching for proof of communication with the deceased.
He truly embodied the greatest intellectual struggle of the modern age, the conflict between cold, objective reason and the profound human need for belief, for comfort, and for ultimate meaning.
When logic failed him, when the industrialized slaughter of the First World War stripped all certainty from the world, he found a new certainty in the metaphysical.
He substituted his deductive faith for a spiritual faith, using the language of science to defend the inexplicable. He needed that new revelation to provide solace, and once he found it, his scientific training became subservient to his spiritual conviction.
So what does this all mean for you? The real enduring mystery wasn't the identity of Jack the Ripper or Professor Moriarty. The real mystery was how one man could be so deeply rooted in the rational world and yet so passionately dedicated to the unknown.
And look at his two competing legacies. Sherlock Holmes represented pure, unfeeling logic, valuing truth above all else, even human connection.
But Doyle, the man, tirelessly worked as a legal advocate, applying that same deductive power not for intellectual sport or profit, but to correct profound miscarriages of justice in cases like Edalji and Slater.
Exactly. If Holmes was the embodiment of clinical deduction, Doyle's selfless work as a legal crusader represented the compassion and moral responsibility that his literary creation famously lacked.
So which of those two legacies, in the end, truly defined the man? The logic he commercialized, or the compassion he acted upon in real life? That's the question that allows us to truly understand the secret architect of the modern world.